If you're a senior architect, you know the dream, right? Being able to develop seamlessly across any cloud you want. But the reality, well, the reality is usually a tangled mess. So today, we're going to architect a solution, a unified service catalog API that can finally bring some order to all that chaos. Does this look familiar? I bet it does. Your teams are just trying to build and deploy cool stuff, but instead they're constantly wrestling with the totally different quirks and complexities of AWS, Azure, and GCP. It's this daily struggle that just slows everything way down. The real problem, the root of it all, is that every cloud provider insists on doing things their own way. What you call a serverless function over here has a totally different name, a different setup, and a different API over there. And all that inconsistency just creates friction. And you know what that inconsistency leads to? Complexity. A whole lot of it. You're not just managing one ecosystem, you're trying to master 3 separate ones, each with its own set of tools, its own security models, its own deployment pipelines. It's a massive cognitive load for your teams to carry. And the result of all that friction and complexity? Well, everything becomes painfully slow. Development cycles get stretched out, deployments become brittle and just full of errors. And innovation? It practically grinds to a halt. Because everybody is spending their precious time just trying to navigate this multi-cloud maze instead of actually building value. So how in the world do we fix this? We're going to tackle it in 5 key steps. First, we'll really dig into the multi-cloud maze. Then we'll lay out our unified API vision. After that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of building core services. Then we'll add some smart guardrails. And finally, we'll talk about the huge self-service payoff. Okay, let's dive right in. First, we need to properly understand the problem we're trying to solve, what I am calling the multi-cloud maze. You see, this chaos isn't just one single thing. You've got developers who have to learn completely unique APIs for each provider. The DevOps team is stuck maintaining totally different deployment processes. Your security team is pulling their hair out trying to enforce policy across separate, disconnected models. All of this creates these frustrating silos where nothing is shared and nothing is standardized. So to get out of this mess, we need a brand new strategy. And that brings us to the solution, what we'll call the Unified API Vision. The vision is actually pretty simple, but it's powerful. We want a single unified API for our entire organization. A developer shouldn't need to know or even care if they're deploying to AWS or Azure. They just make a request to your API, and the platform you built handles all the complexity behind the scenes. The easiest way to think about it is like building an internal app store. A developer needs a database. Great. They go to your internal store, they request one, and boom, it's provisioned for them instantly with all the company's best practices already baked right in. It's simple, it's clean, and it's completely self-service. All right, that sounds fantastic in theory, but how do we actually build this internal app store? Well, this next section is the blueprint for our core services. As the architect, this is your mission. You're not just connecting a bunch of APIs together. No, you're creating abstractions. An abstraction is what hides all that underlying mess from each cloud and instead presents your developers with a simple, standardized, easy-to-use product. And you don't have to boil the ocean here. You start with the most common needs. First, you create an abstraction for a web app. This one service could deploy a container to AWS Fargate or Azure App Service or Google Cloud Run. The developer doesn't need to know. Then you do the same for a database and a message queue. You just build out these core standardized building blocks one by one. And the result of all this hard work is this beautiful, powerful simplicity. A developer makes one single API call, like create database, and your platform does all the heavy lifting. That right there, that's the real power of abstraction. Now, hold on. Giving developers this much self-service power, it can feel a little risky, right? To give them all that speed while you maintain safety and governance, we absolutely need to add some smart guardrails. So we're going to build 2 key governance layers directly into our unified API. First up, quota management. This makes sure that teams can't accidentally spin up, 1,000 super expensive database instances. And second, approval workflows, which can automatically trigger a manual review for requests that are particularly sensitive or costly. And the difference this makes, it's like night and day. Without guardrails, self-service can easily lead to budget overruns and all kinds of security nightmares. But with these guardrails, you get the absolute best of both worlds. You get developer speed and centralized cost control, security, and compliance. So after doing all this architectural work, what's the big payoff? Why is this journey such a total game changer for the business? Let's take a look. What you're doing here is fundamentally changing the entire operating model. Instead of having teams grapple with the complexity of 3 separate clouds, they now get to interact with one simple, elegant, powerful interface that you own and you control. And the benefits for the business? Oh, they are huge. Your developers feel empowered, and frankly, they're happier. Your company gets its products to market way faster. Every single deployment is consistent and automatically follows your best practices. And you finally get a single pane of glass for governance and cost control, all while creating services that are truly platform agnostic. At the end of the day, the complexity and chaos of multi-cloud isn't some technical problem you just have to live with. It's an architectural choice. And by building a unified service catalog, you're choosing order, you're choosing speed, and you're choosing control. So the only real question left is, what will you build?